Hello and welcome. In today's video, we're going to be starting to configure our OpenMediaVault for our self-hosting environment. In the last video, we installed it, so we are running on a fresh install here. We're going to start off by logging in using the default login, admin, and OpenMediaVault. And when we log in here, we're greeted with the welcome message. Welcome to OpenMediaVault. We have a donate link we can click on to donate to the project, and some links for the support. We can dismiss that with this X over here. And then we'll take a look in the upper right corner where we have our host name that we set on install, OpenMediaVault. We have a notification center that is letting us know there are updates available. A help section for documentation, link to the forum, to the home page, and our user settings, where step one is going to be change the password. We don't want to leave the default password, so let's change it to something other than OpenMediaVault and click save. Now that's done, we can take a look at some of the other settings we have here at dark mode. Change language, set up our dashboard, and then over on the right under power, we can log out, reboot, standby, or shut down the system. So then we'll move on to step two. Step two is going to be heading over to System, Update Management. Right here, click Install Updates, confirm, say yes. And now this is going to start installing the updates. It's got a large update to do, so it's going to take some time. I'm going to fast forward it. All right, and the update is finished. You can see it says end of line. The close button is now active. We can click on it. And then we want to, over here, click apply. We got this yellow banner that's going to pop up a lot of times that we make changes in the user interface. And if you want to see what the changes are, you can click on show details. It's letting you know that those modules are going to be updated. But we're going to go ahead and click apply and yes. And if you get this message, just do what it says. Left click your mouse button and then it will load up. Now, when you do a large system update like this, it's a good idea to do a restart on the system. And OpenMediaVault is actually really good about letting you know that. You can see in the notification center, it's saying system restart is required. You're not going to have to do that with every update. If it's a smaller upgrade to just a few smaller packages, it doesn't require a system reboot. But in this case, after a fresh install and doing a big upgrade, we need to do the reboot. So we click on the power menu, reboot, confirm, yes, and now the system is rebooting. And log back in, and remember we changed the password, so we have to use the new password that we set on it. And we're greeted back with our dashboard. We haven't set anything up on our dashboard. We could do that now. Click on the settings page, select a few of the widgets here. CPU is a good one, file systems, load average, memory, really whatever you want in here. These are the ones that I like to select, and then click save. And they all loaded up here aside from the CPU one. I'm not sure if it's because I'm running this in a virtual machine that widget failed to load. However, I'm not going to worry about it. We're going to move on to the next step. If you get that message after you reboot because your browser was still open, I just clicked past it, but do what it said and hit Control Shift and R, and that should clear the cache. Go back to storage and to disks. All right, now on this page, you just want to mainly make sure all your disks are showing up in here. There is one other thing you can do here. If you have a Windows file system like NTFS, let's say you bought a used drive off of eBay and you want to wipe that file system off of it, you can do that from this page. So if you click on a disk, you can go up here to wipe, hit confirm, say yes, and then you can do a quick format, and this is going to wipe the file system off of it. Don't do that on any disk that you want to keep the data, and definitely do not do that on the disk that OpenMediaVault is installed on. When you're happy that all your disks are showing up here, then you can move over to File Systems. If you have existing file systems that are supported in OpenMediaVault, So if I open up this tab, you can see some of them here: Btrfs, ext3, ext4, f2fs, jfs, xfs. You can just go over to this play looking icon and just mount it. Now, none of the virtual disks that I have set up have a file system on them right now, so I'm not going to get anything in this drop down, but that is where you could mount an existing file system and be able to use the data that's already on that disk. But I'm going to cancel off of that. If you have blank disks without a file system on them, then you're going to go ahead and click on create and mount a file system. And this is where paths again may diverge. If you have a bunch of matching drives for your data pool, you'll want to select Btrfs, and then you can click on RAID 1 or RAID 10 and then select those devices. So on this setup, you can see I put 4 matching 4 GB drives, and then I have a 8 GB drive. So if this was my setup that I was going to use, I would put these in a RAID 10. I'd select these 4, and then I would hit save. I'm not going to, because I'm going to be ending up going a different route. And then I would do this one more time and do a single for the backup disk. Because remember, RAID is not a backup, so even though you have the redundancy of the RAID built in with Btrfs RAID system, you're still going to need a separate device to send the snapshots to in order to have a proper backup system. So that's where you would make this separate 8 GB drive. So you have to take that into consideration with the amount of drives you have. But I'm going to cancel off of this, and we're going to move forward with the idea that you only have like 2 drives for your data. And in that case, you would select your data disk, which these 4 GB drives are going to all end up being considered the data disk. And then I'm going to be considering this 8 GB drive the backup disk. And these are only gigabyte virtual drives just to save space on my computer. Your actual drives would likely be in the terabytes. So let's move forward with the idea that you have a data disk and a backup disk. You would put the ext4 file system on it. And now here you're actually mounting it. So you can see up here it's saying select the file system to mount. And what's nice about OpenMediaVault is it has this built-in usage warning threshold, which if it goes over 85% capacity, it's going to notify you. Now, we don't have a notification system set up just yet, but that's something that we'll be doing later. So now this is ready to be mounted and have the file system take effect on it. We'd have to click apply. Before we do that, we'll add the rest of the drives. Later on, I'm going to be showing how to set up SnapRAID and MergerFS, and that only makes sense if you have more than 2 drives set up. But if you only had 2, you would do that, click apply, and you would be ready. This is where you click apply, and after this finishes, the file systems will all be mounted and ready to be used. All right, good. So here we are. The file systems are all mounted. You can see available space, use space, check marks, and that they're all online. The file system that they're using, ext4. Now, like I said, I'm going to be going with 4 GB drives for my data pool. But if you only have 1 data drive, you can just ignore these other 3 here. And then this would be the backup drive for us, the separate data pool or the separate drive that the backups are going to end up going to. And it's a good idea that your backup drive is at least the same size as your data drive pool. So if it's only 1 drive, if you got 2 4 terabyte drives or 2 8 terabyte drives, that's good. If you have a larger data pool with a combination of drives, you want to make sure your backup drive is at least bigger than the amount of data that you're going to be storing on that data drive so that it can hold everything, right? That's the idea of having a backup drive. The next thing that I like to do is set up my users. We'll go over to users and then click on the plus symbol, click create, and we're going to make a user for ourselves with a password. And then we're going to select our shell. I like bash, but that's a personal preference. And then we need to select the groups. Because we're going to be doing a lot of configuration with this account, we want to give ourselves some different group permissions. One is going to be the OpenMediaVault admin, which is going to give us admin access in the user interface here, sudo, and SSH. And those are the ones we're going to set for now. We may find we need other ones later, but that's good for now. We'll click save. And now would be a good time to add any other users that we can think of. So we want to add a user for each other individual in the house, even if they're not going to be logging in and configuring the server. In order to manage user file permissions, we want each person to have their own account. So for me, I only have one other person in the house. We'll set up an account for her. And the shell isn't going to matter. Groups aren't going to matter. They're just going to be placed in the default user group. So all we need to do is click save. I'll make another one for my dog, Frank. And you would for anybody else that you have in the house. A couple other ones that I like to make are for a media client. I call it Cody, but you could just name it anything else that you might want. And this is the account that accesses the media on all the TVs. And then I like to have one more account for Docker to access the folder where all the Docker configs are going to be mounted to. And once those are all set, then you can click apply. Now that our users are set up, and most importantly, our user, Tony, with the SSH permission, we want to test to make sure we have SSH access to the server. And let's go ahead to services and SSH. This should be enabled by default, and it should be working by default. Now, if you are on Windows, you're going to need an SSH client. Putty is a really good one, so just Google it and download it, and then you will be able to use that to SSH into the server. I am running on Linux here. You can see I'm running Manjaro Linux, and I'm just going to use the terminal with the OpenSSH client built into it. So to SSH into the server, for me, I'm just going to type in SSH Tony at 192.168.122.2, the IP address of the server, and hit enter. Now it's asking if this is the correct fingerprint. We've never connected to this server before. It's not going to ask this again in the future, so we can just say yes to this, and then we need to type in our user password. And now we're connected to this server. So you can see for me, it went from Tony at Lion Lee, which is my actual desktop, to Tony at OpenMediaVault, which is the server. So now I am on the server. However, we do not want to use password-based authentication. So we're going to press Control D to log out of the server and back onto our computer here. And then we're going to disable password authentication by unchecking it. And then we click save. We'll apply those changes right away. Then we're going to test to make sure that it's working. So now if we try to SSH back in again, we're getting permission denied because it's no longer going to accept a password for the authentication. We need to create a public private key pair. Now on Linux, that's very easy to do. We're just going to use SSH Keygen, and it's going to ask where it wants us to save this. And I'm going to save it there. And then you can set a password for your key. I'm not going to, because I make sure I'm the only one that has access to these files. But if you're afraid somebody else might get access to your keys, you really should set a passphrase on them. I'm just going to hit enter twice. There's not going to be a password on it. And that created my public-private key pair. Now, in order for that to work, we do need to go back to our user settings and click on our Tony user, click on edit. And then we need to add that public key here. So let's click on browse, and I need to get to that directory. Now you'll see here there's omv.public and omv. omv, that's your private key. That's what you're going to use from your computer. The server needs to have the public key. So we're going to add the public key here. And then we can click on add and save. Apply those changes, and now we'll try to connect back to the server from our desktop using that new private key. So in order to do that, we need to add one option to our SSH connection and give it the -I and then give it the private key. And there we go. We're logged into the server using private public key. If you did set a password on your SSH key, it's going to ask you for your password. But this is what I like about not having a password. I can just like that. I'm logged into my server, ready to issue commands. Now, one thing I wanted to point out here is you can see we got an error message upon login. That's okay for now. We are going to be remedying this later when we start setting up user shares. Right now, OpenMediaVault doesn't have a home directory for users. The next thing we're going to be doing is setting up omv-extras. And for that, we're going to go to omv-extras.org. This is going to give us access to a lot of plugins that are going to make our life easier. However, right here, it's asking us to download a script from the internet and pipe it into bash as root. You never, ever want to do this without trusting the source and understanding what the script is doing. If you're a beginner, I do not want to get you into the habit of doing this. Again, you need to trust the source and understand what the script is doing, because this can do anything. This can put a backdoor on your computer. This can put a virus on your computer. This can delete your files. This can do anything. So you need to make sure that you don't get in the habit of just copy and pasting these into your terminal. Understand them. With that said, I do trust this. If you want to go ahead and copy and paste this in, I am more than happy to recommend that in this specific case. However, we're going to figure this out and go through it just to make sure that it's not doing anything nefarious. You can see it is checking the user to make sure it's root. We can tell that based on this command and this comment. It's setting a variable to this URL here. It is setting a variable to the output of this command. And here's what you can do. You can copy this command and see what it does by pasting it over and running it in your terminal. You can see this command output a 6. Here, it looks like it's doing some logic to check the version, whether or not it's supported. Setting another variable. Setting another variable. It's doing an update, a system update. It's installing this package. Let's see if we have this package. It's probably already installed. We have to sudo that. If you run a command, it tells you that you need to run it as sudo. You can just do sudo !!. It'll run the last command as sudo. And you have to type in your password. It was already installed. So that's good. Here it's downloading this file. So if we put this together, we put these variables together, it's taking this and it's adding this. And then as we checked previously, this was a 6. And so it's downloading this deb file and it's installing it. So we can do the same thing manually. We do have to sudo because we're in the root directory. So I downloaded that file. You can see it's right here now. and then it's doing this dpkg-i to install it. We can do the same thing. And after that, it removes it. So we can do that as well. And that's it. That was basically the script. We just did it in those few commands. I just wanted to show you that so that if you ever encounter some type of documentation or a website that tells you to pipe a script into Bash, you actually open the script up first, you look through it, you make sure it's not doing anything nefarious or shady. Do not get into the habit of running scripts from online sources piped into Bash. Unless, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record here. It's okay to do it in this case. Go ahead and just copy this, paste it into your OpenMediaVault SSH session, type in your root password. But please, please, please understand, do not get in the habit of doing that. Moving on, we're going to log back into the web interface and see what has changed now. Well, for one, you can see our CPU module, our widget, is up and working. That has nothing to do with what we just did. It just decided to work for some reason. But if we go over to System, what has changed now is we have this omv-extras. Again, we get this little glitchy user interface. We have Control-Shift-R. Make sure that doesn't continue to repeatedly happen. System omv-extras. We now have an easy way to install Docker, which is great because a lot of the services we're going to be setting up are going to be running in Docker containers. And if we go over to plugins, I know I didn't show you what this looked like before, but all these ones that have omv-extras.org in them now are added since we ran that. And there's a whole host of plugins in here that are going to be beneficial to us, like Borg and SnapRaid and MergerFS, that are going to make life much, much, much easier to get those things set up and working. So that's going to be it for this one. We have a lot more configuring to do, a lot more services and things to set up, but we're going to save that for future videos. In this video, just to recap really quickly, step 1, we changed the password. Step 2, we did a system update, rebooted the system, and then we set up SSH access with private public key-based authentication so it's secure, and we installed omv-extras. And in the next video, we're going to get our backup system set up and start installing some of these plugins and services. So stay tuned for that. And as always, thank you for watching, and you have a nice day.